And joining us today is Giulia DeLollo. Giulia is a third-year undergraduate student at Wilfrid Laurier University, majoring in human rights. She's currently serving as a political intern for Member of Parliament Larry Brock, getting hands-on experience in federal politics, policy, research, and constituency work. I actually met Giulia through her work with the Modern Miracle Network. We were both at the Canada Strong and Free event, and we ran into each other, struck up a really good conversation. And I just really enjoyed how open you were, Giulia, to just having a conversation, being unafraid to dialogue. It was a really cool experience. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me.
You don't just do this work for MP Brock and the Modern Miracle Network. You're also the Deputy Director of Operations for Young Professionals in Foreign Policy, Toronto chapter. You are very, very busy. What
Yeah.
do you have any free time? Do you have any spare time?
I always say I'll sleep when I'm dead, but you know what? We find time. We fit it in.
So I said that to my wife on one of our very first dates, and it turned out to be like the biggest whopper because I go to bed very early, and so she
Mm.
claims it's 21 years, so clearly we've gotten over it. But she does claim that I told a little bit of a fib very early on. But yes, that's good. That's funny. I want to start off with your story. You're studying human rights, but you also find yourself drawn to conservative ideals, conservative kind of moral compass frames like free speech, like economic opportunity. How did that personal pathway unfold for you? And what was that one moment that you realized your kind of political identity was more conservative leaning?
hmm Well, I think I really started getting interested in politics when I was young as 14. And at that time, I was in high school and was definitely influenced by a lot of media sources, a lot of echo chambers. So it's fair to say that before or when everything started, I was definitely on the left. And then I saw this one video that was a House of Commons debate about Pierre Poilievre using the 1984 book by George Orwell as a prompt and basically referencing the decline of civil liberties, specifically free speech in Canada. And it made me think. And so it allowed me and propelled me to contest my own beliefs and not take what everybody said just as word. So I started reading and I started researching for myself. And I find that specifically within my degree now, human rights, it brings together a good amount of advocating for those civil liberties in school, but also really allowing me to get more into politics. And throughout all that researching and reading, it has allowed me a more informed sort of view on Canadian politics in general. And I just fell into conservatism.
You mentioned that you had kind of been on the left a little bit. And I think, interestingly enough, that's kind of how our conversation, I think, kind of somehow found itself because was also very much on the left. In fact, for the majority of my political life, 23 of the 25 years that I've been involved in politics. So it could very easily be said that you came out of it much quicker than I did. But you now kind of seeing yourself as I guess more conservative, do you see yourself as occupying a space that is just you're fully in that space and nothing else can kind of encroach in that, in terms of you have beliefs, things that you focus on in terms of policy that are unshakable and unflappable? Or do you find that because you kind of were more on the left, now you have a bit more of an ability to parse through arguments, discussions, and do you find it's easier to dialogue?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A love for research and a love for pursuing truth has really allowed me to see conservatism in the way it's supposed to, not as sort of a radical ideology that I usually see on the left. I don't think my opinions are so rigid. I can be persuaded by good arguments. And I think that's the thing. You know what? At the root of conservatism, at least what I see, is contestation of ideas. And throughout meaningful debate and the marketplace of ideas, me being a free speech advocate and all, of course, it would be illogical of me not to engage in open debate and have an open mind when seeing different ideals. Like, for example, I have many friends who are on the left, and I appreciate my conversation with them because I get to see another perspective. And I think that's the thing that youth, especially in Canada, are lacking is an appreciation for diverse perspectives. And that's what we have lost, especially in universities as well. So, in all, I love all perspectives. My personal convictions just fall within the conservative ideology.
It's interesting you say, the conversation is really needed on the left. I would totally agree with you. What was really interesting for me, Adam Zivo, who's a friend of the show, who's been here, but is also a friend of mine, was recently opining on X about it being harder to come out conservative than it was for him to come out as gay. And it was interesting because when I was exploring the fact that I no longer belong to the left, I started engaging more with conservative folks. Adam actually being one of the first that I really started having open conversations with, but some folks here in Victoria. And I really, this sounds incredibly naive, but I had this very kind of structured archetype of what a conservative was. And that had been informed by years and years and years on the left of kind of the same repetition of what a conservative is. All the things that they hate, all the things that they love, ne'er the twain shall meet, and they're absolutely homogenous. When I started engaging with folks in the conservative circles, I realized, oh my gosh, this is a huge tent. There's so much
Absolutely.
diversity of opinion and thought and ideation. You've got, libertarian conservatives, social conservatives,
Mm.
fiscal conservatives, constitutional conservatives. You've got the red Tories. You've got, prairie conservatives that really have kind of a very different concern, right? So it's so interesting because on the left, that just doesn't exist. It's actually much more
Yes.
homogenous on the left and on the right. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time when I am with my more leftist friends, they're always saying the same rhetoric. It's always the same sort of stuff spewed back to me. And yes, you know what? While that is good for meaningful debate, on the left, I've gotten into significant, I guess, tiffs with people on the right as well, because even within like just those microspheres, we can have a huge disagreement about it, but still come together as, being under the umbrella as conservative. So on the whole, yes, like there's so much diversity, but it is still, I know this sounds contradictory, but it is still much of a unifying force.
In the McLean's article you mentioned, you talked about the TikTok clip. By the way, Julia was featured in a McLean's article. She's on the front page. There's a photo with her and some of her young conservative colleagues, and it's a beautiful piece where each person is provided with an opportunity to share why they are conservative and how do they align. And I'm very ashamed that I didn't know that existed. So I'm very glad that you brought it to my attention and I was able to see that and read through it because it's a very neat portrait of young conservatives. And in that, you talked about Pierre, you're talking about free speech. Can you put yourself just back into that moment for a sec? Because you talked about what it did to you in terms of kind of shaking your ideas a little bit, but I want to see if we can go just a little bit deeper. What did that mean for you? How did that feel in that moment? And what do you think that captured, that kind of moment of that connection with what Pierre was saying, and what that means for kind of your generation's experience writ large?
Well, it made me have a eureka moment. And I think this prompts me to discuss what made me to become a conservative in the first place. So, you know what? Yes, it was moving away from that more leftist ideology. But what really made me become a conservative were those financial constraints that we had when I was younger, especially my mom raising us as a single mother. But also the fact that my mother escaped communism when she came here from the former Yugoslavia. So she informed me a lot about the tenets of hard work and passion and being able just to have freedom. And I think her and all the economic constraints we're having in the broader political landscape of Canada has just put me back into that position, and has made me realize how grateful I am to have a brain and to be able to think and to be able to read also. And for fellow conservative youth, like I urge all of them to take a look at their preconceived notions and contest those and actively read and talk to different people. Because whenever I look back at that McLean's article, I am almost inspired, not by myself, but more so my colleagues and the inspiration to actually write this piece that youth do have a voice and can change the future of Canada.
And you say look back. You say I'm going to say this from the perspective of someone who's turning 42 this year. You say look back. It was literally less than a year ago, and you and your kind of late teen, early 20-year-old cohort. It's so fascinating to see that you have this ability to project your influences, your needs, your concerns, and you go through so many things in your specific piece about affordability, about finances, economics. You talk about your parents and that struggle. Can you tell me, kind of outside of politics, what values or life experiences, as those that you just shared, really shaped your worldview? Like, you've got the family pieces. Tell us more about the community, the stories that your mom must have shared escaping a former Yugoslavia, and kind of those early experiences that you had that really helped shape who you are now and who you look to as you're kind of getting into that adulthood, as if we can say that, because you're an adult now, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I think through my more formative years, and once I started getting more interested in storytelling, and especially the stories shared by my mom, I came to realize that freedom is a good thing. Freedom is a thing that not only that youth need, but needs to be presented in politics just in general. And I see a huge lack of that. So while she propelled me to become a conservative, the person that has sort of carried me through that hardship and sort of being different from the vast majority was my father. So my dad last year died of cancer, and he always said, "Julia,
So
like,
sorry.
no, thank you. The pain's going to end. Just go through it." So yes, while my mother prompted those values, my dad and seeing what he went through really put things into perspective, that things can change, that with enough grit and determination and hard work, um, you can dictate your future. I mean, after all, they don't say the world's your oyster for no reason.
It's true. I mean, the opportunities that you have out in front of you now are, I mean, I cast myself back to 19 years old. It was 2003 for me. So the world is an incredibly different place from then. So many more opportunities. It's so much closer to you, and that experience, that familial stuff, it really does, it makes up so much of who we are and how we enter the world in many different ways, not just how we see it, but how we interact with it, how we perceive it. And so it's really interesting to hear about those kind of family experiences. I'm very sorry about your dad. I actually, I lost my dad when I was 23. So, in
I'm so
it,
sorry to hear that.
sounds like similar circumstances, actually. Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, that shapes you too, right? When you have someone that close to you die so young, there is
Mhm,
something about that shapes you in a way. I wanted to kind of look back and make them proud, and do a little bit of what I could to live
absolutely.
more life for him. I don't know how that, if that resonates with you at all.
Yeah, well, you know what? I go through each day just being grateful about life. And the really funny thing about this whole thing, that while I'm going through life being a conservative, my dad was actually really believed a lot in the NDP.
Mhm.
So even though we have those different ideas, we still came together, had great debates. We were open with one another. Um, he was my champion. He was great for me. And you know what? His memory will definitely live on.
Love to dads, love to moms out there. They are, all of them, awesome. I want to look at some broader themes around young Canadians, because I mentioned it's different in 2003 that it was than it is now. A good example, I my first year's tuition when I went to university was, I'm trying to remember. I had a grant, a few other things, but it was right around $3,000 for a year. It's a lot different now. To go to university, it's a lot more expensive.
Oh yeah,
Housing's more expensive. Everything is more expensive. Jobs are less available. Cost of living is more. The pressures on youth today, I, I'm grateful in many ways that I came through my youth when I did, because it seems so difficult right now to
mm,
kind of exit out of a high school, go into university, look at what the job market looks like, and kind of, I don't want to sound maudlin about this, but feel hopeless, right?
for
So
sure.
when you talk to your peers, what concerns come up the most often, and how do you think that's shaping the political leanings of your colleagues? Because we just had a poll that came out very recently that said, I think it was for under 35, if only they voted, it would be a whopping conservative majority in Canada, like
Yeah.
massive, massive, massive. So clearly, your cohort is way more conservative than mine was.
Yeah, we are constantly worried if we're going to be able to buy a home, if we're going to be able to sort of pay back our tuition, if we're going to be able to start a family. And I know all of this really began after COVID-19 and really prompted people to become adults a lot earlier than just to enjoy their youth. And I think putting us in this different sort of sphere. In this new era, in this new year, we have almost been forced to worry about this stuff much earlier on and grow up. So absolutely, I am truly worried about if I'm going to be able to support kids when I have them, have a home, what kind of job I'm going to get. Everything is definitely pressing down on my mind. And I do believe that's why I'm working so hard now with all these groups. And what I do is because I want to secure a good future for myself. That sort of sentiment is pretty much the same across all of my youth group who want to have a pretty good life.
You had any colleagues of yours or peers who have kind of given up and they've said, you know what, it's never going to happen. I'm just going to do what I have to do to kind of get through life, live with my parents as long as I can until I can hopefully get a house. But really, the ship has passed me by.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have entered this huge mindset of just hopelessness. And the thing we're lacking is empowerment. Really, what I can pin the conservatives for is they got the youth vote. Now it's time to help youth and actively get them involved in the party and help them shape the future of conservative politics and the conservative identity in general. I think the party must also help us achieve a Canadian dream that we all want and not re-enter the state of hopelessness, and the thing that or the thought that things won't work out.
There, and I experienced this with my time in the NDP, and I was this at one point, a youth activist in the party. There's always a youth-esque energy that can push parties a little bit further than they're comfortable being pushed, or can advocate for things that might not be places where, for lack of a better word, the sage elders of the party may want to go. And there's a reticence, I think, a fear that people can be so far removed from that experience, or the situations are so different, or just because of where you are in life, your needs are different than what they may be back then. How do you see that gap being bridged? Because I see right now there are interesting conversations there around kind of cultural conservative issues, a lot of things being pushed forward in that kind of space, that world. And then you see there's what are called kind of the old stock conservatives, which really just kind of want to focus on the economy, just the economy. That's really what matters. It's just the economy. We don't really care about all this other stuff. How do you bridge those two so that youth can not just feel like they're being heard and listened to, but, as you say, are actually involved in working towards the solutions to improve their lives?
I also, funny enough, I think it is that sense of hopelessness that should be used to empower youth, to get more involved. So yes, I know the culture between those that had it a little more easier in life and could pay $19,000 for a home. Unfortunately, we can't do that. Um, but we need to try to bridge the gap. I believe older people and young people are not that far off. I believe both of us can help one another, if not only for, the moral reasons, but just to make Canada's future stronger, Canada's economy stronger. And in terms of youth's beliefs, I believe they want a great economy. I want to pay $19,000 for a home. Um, but I think we're slowly getting there as things become worse.
There's discussion though about, in some ways, there's been harkening back to Pierre Elliott Trudeau and kind of the culture that he created in Canada, in which the economy exists around. And there's discussions about trying to use government to impose what would be a more conservative culture, kind of essentially establishing a pendulum swing culturally in Canada more in one direction, and not just using government as a lever to make economic policy better and make housing more affordable, but actually shift and shape culture. And I wonder about that, because not because I necessarily disagree, I don't, but I've always thought, is government the one to be imposing culture on people, or should we as conservatives be the ones to say, government, hands off of getting involved in people's lives? Government is, conservatives at our heart are supposed to be about limited government. To me, the idea of imposing culture is really kind of the biggest government you can imagine. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think society is going to progress in the way that it does. And if conservatives truly believe in keeping their hands out of things, they're going to keep their hands out of that. One thing that I think we all can agree that we don't need is more government intervention. Statistically, historically, things usually tend to go awry when the government likes to get their hands in things. So as long as it's not violent, people are not killing one another, I believe it's safe to say that we can allow the people to dictate how they want their culture in Canada to be.
What would you say, because we referenced this a little bit in terms of the transition that you had from being left to being more conservative, and it seems like your cohort has. In my time, young people were always automatically aligned with progressives, with the NDP for certain, or
Mhm.
with the Greens for certain. What has contributed, do you think, from what really seems to be a mass migration? Because, and I posit that grievance is part of this, and it's necessary grievance, it's
Mhm.
understandable grievance, but that grievance tended to gravitate to the left. Why do you think it doesn't anymore?
Because those young people got a job. When I got a job and I started paying taxes and I started contributing to the Canadian economy, I didn't want government taking money out of my pocket for absolutely no reason. And I think what we need is for youth to take a lot more accountability, especially within the economic sphere. Like they need to understand what troubles first-time home buyers have, people going through university have. Yeah, people with tuition that they have to pay back. I think it's because they haven't really been experienced to those real world sort of situations that the left presents a nice, fun picture of everything being very ideal, very fluffy, and a very nice world. But
Very
that's not how it
utopian. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And that's not how it has come to happen. I've seen 15-year-olds talking about the pros of socialism and how communism needs to make a reemergence because it was just so great for people back then, but it really wasn't. I think what we need to do, like my mother talked to me, was saying, you know what? In communism, didn't really get much. Freedom is where it's at. And we really need to show them what sort of situations they will go through when they're adults, and hopefully that will change their perception of things.
I think this is a great transition point. Talk about freedom, free speech, to talk about free speech, and specifically on
Mhm.
campuses, because it is such a hot topic these days. You've certainly expressed your views that your speech isn't always welcome. You talked about this in the Maclean's article. How do you think universities should balance respect for diverse opinions with protecting students from harm? Because it really does
Mhm.
seem like one of those is being prioritized over the other.
Right. For right now, it's a very chilling situation that's going on. One thing that I don't know is talked about is the acceptable or the safe option to stay on campus. And I actually wrote a paper about this probably 2 years ago. We need to not prioritize one over the other, but abridge them both. And I think a good starting point to do that is to identify what kind of speech is genuine and academic and comes from a very like candid point of view other than those that are aimed to hurt. And I think just by regular logic we are able to do that. If somebody hurls insult at you, you obviously know they're not engaging in good conversation. But even those questions and those inquiries that are a little contentious, if they are approached with good academic faith, those shouldn't be shunned or ostracized. I think we all have a place in universities to speak. And if universities want to uphold their status as bastions of higher education and academic freedom, then that should be the priority.
How did universities get here? When I went to university, certainly there didn't seem to be this much homogeneity. There didn't seem to be this much rancor. There didn't seem to be this much kind of universality of perception. Although, albeit, I did go to UBC Okanagan, so there was a conservative campus club, there was an NDP campus club, and there was a lot of space for diversity of opinion. I spent most of my time there talking and debating different things, but it was very open. To your point, it seems very, very closed. How, like, did this happen quickly? Did it happen all at once? And how is your cohort really viewing that?
Well, a book by Sigal R. Ben Porath, I forget the name of the book right now, showed me that this actually happens in cycles. This is not something that is just a one-off, but this has definitely happened in history before. When we're looking at the waves of feminism or what happened with the Vietnam War, in North America, we've had a lot of cycles of whether it's closed or open. I'm not saying history repeats itself, but it often rhymes. I think we're going through another one of those cycles where we need to have a recommitment to truth and open inquiry overall.
Is it free speech always, or should there ever be any limits on free speech? And this is a conversation I have a lot, and I go back and forth
Mhm.
in my own head about this.
Hmm. Um, I would almost be a free speech absolutist. Um, But then again, I am all for moderation. If you asked me 2 years ago, I'd probably be all gung ho for free speech, but I can definitely see the drawbacks of all that. So, for example, yes, you do have open inquiry. Yes, you have all of that, but then you do have that harmful rhetoric that you can spew towards people. And I'm not just saying that you disagree with what their pronouns are. It could also be a matter of you don't want them to be alive. And I believe we can both agree that that sort of rhetoric shouldn't even be talked about.
Well, with the rise of anti Semitism in BC, certainly on university campuses, you've seen what that does. You literally have people championing the elimination of a race of people and siding
Yeah.
with a confirmed listed terrorist organization and couching it in anti Zionistic language that is decidedly anti Semitic. So I think on your
Mhm,
point, I think your point's well taken. Much like you, I'm also kind of very much in that absolutism. And I think where the rubber kind of hits the road for me a little bit is where does speech hinder, and it's not feeling safe because my feeling is different than someone else's feeling, so
mhm.
it can't really be based on feeling. But when does it harm someone? When does it put someone's actual safety at risk? And I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but I do think that once we start hitting that area, maybe that's where we need to start thinking about dialing it back. I don't know.
And it's become so normalized in schools, like, going on with this, with the trend of just rampant anti-Semitism, you see it everywhere. And yes, it truly affects those individuals who are not only trying to champion a right to exist, but it also really impacts those who are on the other side, the Muslims who are not radical and who also get labeled as terrorists by virtue of having this extreme group on the left champion the death of Jewish people.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I think there does need to be balance. We need to remember, I think a good principle is always remember the humans behind the speech, the humans that we're talking about. I think we get so lost sometimes in
Mhm.
the mechanics of politics, in the messaging and the narrative, that we do depersonalize a little bit. Like, it certainly has happened to me. You don't be in this work as long as I have without kind of being disconnected from the humanity of this stuff. So I think your point is really good. It's good to remember the people who are impacted by the things that we say. And, do ends always justify the means? I don't know. It's a conversation to have. But if you're trying to hurt someone with words, maybe it's something worth rethinking.
Absolutely. My hope is that at least for young people, this can obviously go to all people, but especially for young people, we shake all of these bad habits and we unify as a force. We want to come together as young conservatives, not only to change the future of policies, but to afford people more liberty, just so that they can go outside and not be hated on automatically. We want to change the future for our future kids. We want to be able to buy a home. I think we need to put these past hateful trends aside and really see one another as being human.
I have just a final question here. It's amazing how fast time goes. Looking forward, and you kind of referenced it a little bit in your final comment, but I want to just ask, what kind of future do you see for Canada? And if you could wave a magic wand and fix one big issue facing young Canadians right now, what would it be?
I think we need to teach young people life skills. Yes, while learning about sociology is good at age 14, they also need to know how to do their taxes. They need to know what goes into renting a car, buying a home, cooking. I think we've lost um, practical lessons. And I'm not saying we filled it with garbage, but it puts people in a situation where they're able to espouse views such as the fact that, or they think that socialism is good or communism is good. I think with putting back these practical lessons and especially getting youth accountable and engaged and participants in the Conservative Party, I believe we can have a great future. Until then, that sense of hopelessness does come back because I'm not seeing a change. Although I'm seeing a lot more youth get involved into conservative politics, I don't see that reciprocity on the Conservative Party in general. The Conservative Party, especially with the convention coming up, needs to do more for youth. And until then, we can't have a better Canada, a more informed Canada, and a freer Canada until we have youth participating in the political sphere.
Very well said, Julia. Thank you. Before we go, I have a segment of my podcast. You're going to be the first person actually to do this. It's called the Fast Five. So you are the inaugural Fast Five section of this
Honored.
podcast. So number one, what makes you happy?
Now you're really putting me on the hot seat here.
That's right.
Living. I love being alive. I love living. I love having the ability to do things each day. I love having freedom.
What makes you sad?
That I don't see going back to that, I don't see youth more engaged in politics and caring enough about seeking truth.
What makes you excited?
The unknown. Change can always happen. So yes, I'm not rigid in my belief that Canada's going downhill. But anything can happen. And that's what's truly exciting.
What makes you scared?
That we will become communists. I really hope that doesn't happen. And economic freedom doesn't just go down the toilet.
And what makes you hopeful?
The fact that we already have youth enraged, engaged, and excited. And the fact that we can hopefully rely on them to one day be future leaders and make Canada a great country.
I think with you involved, it is absolutely possible. So thank you so much, Giulia DeLollo. Thank you for coming onto the podcast, being here, talking about your experiences about youth. And look, I mean, when I say, I think with youth like you, engaged, involved, passionate, speaking your mind, and actually doing the work. It's not just about the talking, it's about the doing. And you're very clearly
Mhm.
doing that. You know what? We got a great future ahead of us in this country, and it's very exciting to watch. So thanks again for coming today.
Yes, thank you so much, Ryan.